Welcome to Housewives Tonight, your front row seat to the biggest headlines, unexpected turns, and exclusive behind-the-scenes insights from the world of reality TV. Stay ahead with every story that matters. The headlines were impossible to ignore. A friendship that once looked unbreakable, two marriages that unraveled in public, and now a rumor so explosive that it threatened to redefine one of Beverly Hills' most famous inner circles. Social media erupted with claims that Mauricio and Dorit Kemsley were somehow headed toward marriage, turning Kyle Richards' most painful chapter into what some online were calling her worst nightmare. But before anyone accepts that story as fact, there's an important distinction to make. Despite the sensational headlines spreading across YouTube, blogs, and fan accounts, there is no verified evidence that Mauricio and Dorit Kemsley have become married or announced plans to marry. Instead, what actually exists is a complicated web of public divorces, fractured friendships, emotional confrontations, and years of speculation that has fueled one of the biggest conversations in the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills universe. Reports throughout 2026 have continued to focus on Mauricio remaining single, while Dorit's public attention has centered on her divorce from Kemsley and her damaged friendship with Kyle Richards. And sometimes the truth behind a rumor is even more fascinating than the rumor itself. Because this isn't simply a story about whether two people are secretly in love. It's about trust. It's about loyalty. It's about what happens when decades of friendship begin to collapse under the pressure of fame, cameras, divorce, and public opinion. Long before the headlines questioned Mauricio and Dorit's relationship, the four names, Kyle Richards, Mauricio Dorit Kemsley, and Kemsley, represented one of the strongest alliances in Beverly Hills. For viewers, they weren't just reality television personalities. They were the definition of stability inside a franchise built on conflict. Kyle had spent years establishing herself as one of the faces of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. While friendships came and went, businesses rose and fell, and cast members cycled through the show, Kyle remained one of the constants. Standing beside her was Mauricio Their marriage lasted nearly 3 decades before they publicly announced their separation in 2023, shocking fans who had watched them survive countless seasons together. Even after separating, the two remained legally married for some time and repeatedly emphasized their commitment to family despite the end of their romantic relationship. Then there was Dorit Kemsley, introduced years earlier. Dorit gradually became more than just another housewife. She became one of Kyle's closest friends. Family vacations, holiday celebrations, private dinners, children growing up together. The audience watched those relationships develop over multiple seasons until many fans believed the connection extended far beyond television. Kemsley shared his own close friendship with Mauricio. Outside the cameras, the two men often appeared together, and their bond became another reason viewers saw these families as deeply connected. That closeness is exactly why everything that followed became so emotionally charged. Because when relationships begin changing inside such a tightly connected group, every conversation suddenly carries new meaning. Every glance becomes evidence. Every photograph becomes a theory. Every silence becomes suspicious. As Kyle and Mauricio adjusted to life after separation, another marriage inside that same circle was beginning to crack. Dorit and announced their separation in 2024, eventually leading to an increasingly public divorce battle. Court filings, financial disagreements, and emotional interviews transformed what had once been another seemingly glamorous Bravo marriage into a painful legal and personal conflict. Suddenly, two of Beverly Hills' most recognizable couples were navigating remarkably similar life changes at nearly the same time. For fans, that coincidence alone generated endless discussion. Then came the moment that poured gasoline on an already growing fire. During season 15, Dorit reached out to Mauricio, not to pursue romance, but because she believed he might help improve communication between her and PK, who happened to be Mauricio's longtime friend. Their private sit-down immediately became one of the season's most talked about moments. Dorit later admitted she regretted the meeting. She said she had hoped Mauricio could remain neutral, but ultimately felt disappointed, describing the conversation as a complete waste of time because she believed he had accepted PK's version of events. Yet online, the internet interpreted something entirely different. Screenshots spread across X. TikTok creators slowed down clips. YouTube channels replayed scenes frame by frame. Comment sections exploded with questions that no one could actually answer. Why meet privately? Why didn't Kyle know beforehand? Did Mauricio say something viewers never heard? Or was this simply another example of reality television audiences searching for hidden meanings inside ordinary conversations? That uncertainty became fertile ground for speculation, and speculation travels much faster than verified information. Years earlier, rumors linking Mauricio and Dorit had already circulated among parts of the fan community, often based on brief interactions shown on television or isolated photographs. Those rumors repeatedly resurfaced whenever new episodes aired, despite never being substantiated. By 2026, the circumstances had changed dramatically. Kyle and Mauricio were separated. Dorit and PK were divorcing. The friendship between Kyle and Dorit had deteriorated into one of the central storylines of season 15. Suddenly, old rumors found brand new life. Viewers who had once dismissed the gossip started asking whether there had always been something more beneath the surface. But the actual conflict unfolding on television wasn't centered around a secret romance. It was centered around betrayal, at least emotionally. Throughout season 15, Kyle and Dorit openly confronted each other over support, loyalty, and trust. Dorit expressed disappointment that Kyle hadn't stood beside her during her divorce. Kyle, meanwhile, acknowledged their friendship had reached one of its lowest points. Both women spoke publicly about hoping reconciliation might someday be possible, even while admitting they hadn't been able to repair the damage. For longtime viewers, watching those conversations unfold was almost harder than watching either marriage end. Because marriages sometimes fail. Friendships between women who once called each other family aren't supposed to. And that's what made every reunion appearance, every after-show interview, every podcast, every social media comment feel so significant. The audience wasn't just watching reality television anymore. They were watching relationships they'd invested in for years slowly unravel before millions of people. Then came perhaps the most dangerous ingredient of all: silence. Neither Mauricio nor Dorit ever confirmed the sensational marriage rumors dominating parts of social media. In fact, Mauricio publicly stated he was single, pushing back against dating speculation altogether. But silence rarely satisfies the internet. Instead, it creates room for imagination. And imagination, especially inside the world of celebrity gossip, often becomes louder than facts themselves. As season 15 continued, another confrontation would leave fans questioning whether Kyle and Dorit could ever rebuild what they'd lost, because what happened during the reunion wasn't simply another Housewives argument. For many viewers, it became the moment everything changed forever. The reunion stage has always been where unfinished business comes to the surface. Confessions that were carefully avoided during filming suddenly become impossible to escape once the cameras stop following cast members through lavish homes and extravagant parties. Every look is magnified. Every sentence is dissected. Every silence becomes its own statement. And for Kyle Richards and Dorit Kemsley, the season 15 reunion wasn't simply another televised argument. It became the latest chapter in a friendship that both women admitted had reached a breaking point. By this stage, viewers had spent an entire season watching tension build between two women who once described each other as family. Gone were the carefree vacations, the shared laughter, and the easy conversations that had once defined their relationship. Instead, nearly every interaction carried years of unresolved hurt. One of the biggest issues centered on something surprisingly simple: support. Not money, not fame, not television contracts. Support. For Dorit, the pain wasn't just that her marriage to PK Kemsley was falling apart. It was the feeling that one of her closest friends wasn't standing beside her during one of the most difficult periods of her life. During interviews following the reunion, Dorit openly acknowledged she and Kyle had not spoken since filming, but emphasized that she still believed reconciliation could happen if both women genuinely wanted it. She explained that repairing any friendship requires effort from both sides. She said she remained open to having that conversation, but she also made it clear she wasn't willing to force it. It was an unusually vulnerable admission from someone viewers had often seen defending herself amid criticism. Kyle's perspective looked very different. She acknowledged the friendship was in a bad place, but insisted she still cared deeply about Dorit and wanted the best for her. During public appearances promoting the season, Kyle expressed hope that enough time had passed for both of them to eventually rebuild some kind of relationship. Those statements sounded hopeful, yet the reunion itself painted a much more complicated picture. One exchange quickly became one of the most discussed moments among Bravo fans. Kyle had previously used the word erratic while describing Dorit's behavior during conversations with the group. The description immediately struck a nerve. From Dorit's perspective, describing someone navigating a painful public divorce as erratic wasn't simply an unfortunate choice of words. She believed it damaged her reputation. She questioned why Kyle had discussed those concerns with other cast members instead of coming directly to her. For Dorit, the issue wasn't only the word itself. It was what the word implied. Kyle later clarified that she had misspoken. She explained that she wasn't attempting to diagnose Dorit or portray her as unstable. Instead, she connected the comment to her own experience after separating from Mauricio, describing how emotional upheaval had left her feeling scattered, overwhelmed, and unable to focus. She insisted that was the context she intended, even if it hadn't come across that way. But by then, the damage had already been done. Once a statement enters the public conversation, explanations rarely erase first impressions. Fans immediately split into competing camps. Some believed Kyle had genuinely chosen the wrong word during an emotional conversation. Others argued that regardless of intent, discussing Dorit's mental state behind her back crossed a line. Social media transformed the disagreement into something much larger than the women themselves. Short clips circulated across TikTok. Reaction channels replayed the confrontation frame by frame. Thousands of comments debated whether Kyle had betrayed Dorit's confidence, or whether Dorit was unfairly assigning blame to someone who was simply expressing concern. That online divide reflected something deeper about reality television. Audiences rarely watch the same scene the same way. Each viewer brings personal experiences, friendships, divorces, and expectations into what they see on screen. As a result, the very same conversation can create entirely different emotional conclusions. But another subject soon entered the discussion: Mauricio. His name surfaced repeatedly, not because of romance, but because of information. During the reunion, Dorit suggested that comments made by PK during their divorce appeared to reflect private information that she believed had somehow reached him. She questioned whether Mauricio and PK had been discussing her situation, noting the long-time friendship between the two men. Kyle strongly denied sharing information and rejected suggestions that she had intentionally fueled problems between Dorit and PK. The exchange highlighted something many viewers had overlooked. Even after marriages end, friendships often remain. Mauricio and PK had known each other for years. That connection naturally raised difficult questions whenever sensitive information appeared to move between different parts of the group's social circle. None of that proved wrongdoing, but in an environment already filled with suspicion, even ordinary conversations could become controversial. Then Dorit offered perhaps the most striking moment of the reunion. She looked toward Kyle and expressed hope that Kyle's separation from Mauricio would remain relatively peaceful. It sounded compassionate at first, but then she explained why. Drawing from her own divorce experience, Dorit warned that circumstances can change quickly. She described how painful it had been to discover information, hear comments from others, and navigate conversations while feeling isolated. Her message wasn't presented as a prediction. It was a caution based on what she believed she had experienced. The room noticeably shifted. Viewers immediately began asking themselves the same question. Was Dorit trying to protect Kyle? Or was she subtly suggesting there was much more happening behind the scenes than cameras had revealed? Neither interpretation could be confirmed, yet both spread rapidly online. That ambiguity became one of the reunion's defining characteristics. Almost every major conversation left enough unanswered questions for fans to continue debating long after the episode ended. Meanwhile, outside the reunion stage, the internet continued attaching Mauricio's name to increasingly dramatic rumors, including the sensational claim that he and Dorit were secretly planning a future together. Despite those headlines, the reunion itself never produced evidence supporting those stories. Instead, what emerged was something arguably more compelling: a portrait of 4 lives permanently altered by divorce, shifting loyalties, and the enormous pressure of living personal heartbreak in front of millions of viewers. As filming concluded, neither Kyle nor Dorit declared the friendship over forever. Neither woman completely closed the door, yet neither appeared capable of walking through it. Sometimes reconciliation isn't prevented by hatred. Sometimes it's prevented by accumulated disappointment. The little moments, the missed phone calls, the misunderstood comments, the feeling that someone wasn't there when you needed them most. Those moments rarely dominate headlines, but they often determine whether relationships survive. And as Bravo fans continued analyzing every interview, every podcast appearance, and every social media post, another question quietly began gaining momentum. If Kyle and Dorit's friendship had become this fractured, what would happen when the cameras returned? What happened next wasn't a dramatic confession. There wasn't a surprise engagement. There wasn't a hidden wedding ceremony. Instead, the story became something that often proves even more powerful in reality television: perception. By the time the reunion episodes had aired, viewers weren't just reacting to what Kyle Richards and Dorit Kemsley actually said. They were reacting to everything they believed had happened behind the scenes. One interview led to another. A podcast appearance generated dozens of reaction videos. A short Instagram clip became the basis for thousands of comments. Suddenly, fans weren't simply following the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. They were conducting their own investigations. Every old episode was revisited. Every awkward interaction was replayed. Every lingering glance became a potential clue. The internet has a remarkable ability to rewrite history. Moments that originally appeared insignificant suddenly take on entirely different meanings once audiences know how relationships eventually unfold. A casual dinner conversation, a shared laugh, a friendly compliment. Years later, those same scenes are examined as though they contained hidden messages all along. That's exactly what happened here. Longtime Bravo viewers began revisiting earlier seasons, searching for evidence that tensions between Kyle and Dorit had existed long before either woman openly acknowledged them. Some believed they noticed subtle signs of growing distance. Others argued those conclusions were the result of hindsight, that people naturally interpret old footage differently once they know where a relationship ends. Neither side could prove its theory, yet both became equally passionate. As the debate intensified, another topic quietly resurfaced. Loyalty, not romantic loyalty, friendship loyalty. For years, Kyle had developed a reputation among many viewers as someone who valued long-term relationships above almost everything else. Whether defending close friends or standing beside family members through difficult moments, loyalty became part of her public identity. That reputation made the collapse of her friendship with Dorit feel especially significant, because when someone known for valuing loyalty publicly questions whether that loyalty still exists, fans immediately want to know why. During various interviews surrounding season 15, both women described feeling unsupported by the other. Those words carried enormous emotional weight. Support. It's a simple word, yet people rarely define it the same way. For Kyle, support may have meant understanding her emotional struggles following the end of a decades-long marriage. For Dorit, support meant having someone defend her while navigating a painful public divorce. Neither woman necessarily denied caring about the other. Instead, they disagreed about what caring should have looked like. That distinction matters, because many friendships don't end after one explosive argument. They slowly erode through unmet expectations. One missed phone call, one misunderstood comment, one moment when someone needed comfort and believed it never arrived. Over time, those moments begin stacking together until the relationship barely resembles what it once was. Viewers watching from home recognized something painfully familiar. This wasn't only reality television anymore. It reflected experiences many people have lived themselves. Friends growing apart, life changing unexpectedly, people needing different things during difficult seasons of life. That's one reason the storyline resonated far beyond Bravo's usual audience. It wasn't just about Beverly Hills. It was about relationships. Meanwhile, outside the emotional conversations, another battle was unfolding across entertainment media. Click-driven headlines, speculative videos, unverified rumors. Some creators presented internet theories as though they had already been confirmed. Others pushed back, reminding audiences that speculation isn't evidence. The distinction became increasingly important because the most sensational claim, that Mauricio and Dorit were secretly planning a future together, continued circulating despite the absence of verified confirmation. Even so, the rumor refused to disappear. Why? Because celebrity culture doesn't always reward certainty. It rewards curiosity. An unanswered question often generates far more attention than a confirmed answer. That's especially true inside reality television, where audiences naturally expect unexpected twists. The possibility of a shocking revelation keeps viewers engaged, even if that revelation never arrives. Entertainment media understands this dynamic extremely well. A headline asking, "Could this happen?" frequently attracts more attention than one simply stating, "Here's what we actually know." That's why separating verified events from speculation becomes so important. Here's what viewers did witness: Kyle and Mauricio publicly navigating life after separation, Dorit and PK working through an increasingly difficult divorce, Kyle and Dorit's friendship deteriorating throughout season 15, painful reunion conversations centered on trust, communication, and emotional support. Those events happen publicly. Everything beyond that requires careful distinction. Rumors remain rumors unless supported by credible evidence. And despite months of online discussion, verified confirmation of a romantic relationship or marriage between Mauricio and Dorit has not emerged. Ironically, the absence of proof may have fueled the conversation even more. People naturally dislike uncertainty. When information feels incomplete, audiences often fill the gaps themselves. That's human nature. Social media simply accelerates the process. Then another fascinating development began, attracting attention. Rather than focusing exclusively on conflict, both Kyle and Dorit occasionally spoke about the possibility of healing. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually. Neither woman completely erased the years they had shared together. Even while expressing disappointment, they acknowledged that history still mattered. That emotional contradiction fascinated fans. How do you simultaneously love someone and feel deeply hurt by them? How do you miss a friendship while questioning whether it can ever be repaired? Those aren't questions unique to reality television. They're questions millions of people ask in their own lives. Perhaps that's why this storyline became one of the defining emotional arcs of the season, because beneath the designer clothing, the luxury homes, the glamorous events, and the Bravo cameras, there remained something profoundly human. People trying to understand one another after trust had been damaged. Whether that trust can ever be fully restored remains uncertain. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The next chapter of this story may not depend on Mauricio at all. It may depend on whether two women who once considered each other family are willing to have one final honest conversation, away from the noise, away from the headlines, and away from the expectations of millions of viewers. Because if that conversation ever happens, it could change everything.